I know resonates with you. When we talk about things like TikTok, the Chinese talk about theft, and people everywhere else outside of China are basically laughing, saying, you want to talk about the theft of technology? You want to talk about these kind of things? Talk about irony. And Ian, I think it's a delicate moment whereby if you have business in China, you can no longer talk about what is happening in China. And I'm sure this is something that resonates with you directly, because as far as I understand, Ian, you have no business in China and you're able to speak openly about China. And you know that if you had business there, you wouldn't be, would you?
That's right. It'd be much more difficult. And I think it's a real problem. I mean, for the banks, for the consulting firms, for all the people that ostensibly do independent research. But what can they say about China? Because it's going to undermine their business. I mean, you saw LeBron James, huge advocate for Black Lives Matter, but on Hong Kong, he's towing the PRC line. Not that he knows anything about it, but the point is everyone that does business in China understands it's a big market and the rules change. They determine what the rules will be. On TikTok specifically, we need to understand that it's not just about China's national security issues and their control of data, which, you have to prove. Do we have evidence? Is an open question. But it's also reciprocity. The Chinese government does not allow key American tech firms to do business as usual in the world's largest data market, whether you're talking about Facebook, whether you're talking about Google, whether you're talking about Wikipedia or Reddit. None of them are allowed inside mainland China with, 1.4 billion people and a majority of them online. So, I mean, why would you allow Chinese tech firms to have openness with the United States in that environment? You asked me about my book, Superpower. But, the book that I think is more relevant for this is one I wrote about 10 years ago called The End of the Free Market. And if you're in a world where the soon-to-be largest economy is authoritarian and state capitalist, you don't have a global free market anymore. And the idea that the United States is going to pretend that we do, and we're going to give the Chinese complete access to the American consumer base and database is ludicrous on its face.
Ian, there's a question about how markets price these rising U.S.-China tensions. They've been more general in nature when you talk about 5G or tech predominance. It's hard to price that in. It's easier to price in a trade deal or a trade deal that's falling apart, and senior U.S. and Chinese officials are getting together to discuss the progress of the Phase 1 trade deal. Do you expect it to be thrown out?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that the Phase 1 trade deal is increasingly marginal to the U.S.-China relationship. And I'm glad you framed the question and the interview you've done with me that way, because most of the times you're talking to you guys, it's in the last few months, it's all been about what about the Phase 1 trade deal? And I understand that if we get rid of it, the tariffs are going up, and that's going to affect American voters, American consumers. But the reality is that it may well get thrown out in the next 3 months, especially if Trump feels like he's losing as we get closer to the election. But much more concerning is the potential that we really come to blows with the Chinese, that mistakes lead to escalation. And then you're not talking about the Phase 1 deal. You're talking about can large swaths of Americans travel to China still? Will we have to pull our expats out? Will it be a dangerous environment for them? Will baseline trade between our two countries be disrupted? Will companies have non-tariff moves against them that make it impossible for large U.S. companies to still do business in China? What's the future of Apple, for example? Companies like that. Those things are so much broader and deeper than the continued existence of an important but still modest and incremental Phase 1 trade deal. What we do know is that there ain't no Phase 2 trade deal. That's pretty clear.
I think we